Don't move. Don't reach for that door handle. If you do, you're already dead." The whisper came from nowhere, and it stopped Dohyun Kang cold in the middle of his own garage, briefcase in hand, keys halfway to the ignition button on his fob. He turned. A woman stood pressed against a concrete pillar, dressed in the cleaning staff uniform of the Changi Grand Hotel, name tag crooked, hands trembling. "I'm talking to you," she said. "Don't look at me like I'm crazy. Look at your driver instead." Slowly, Dohyun almost laughed. Almost. Men in his position didn't take orders from hotel maids in dim parking garages. But something in her voice, not fear, but certainty, made his stomach tighten. He glanced toward his car. Black, armored, engine purring exactly the way it always did at 6 a.m. His driver sat behind the wheel, same broad shoulders, same gray jacket. "That's Sang-min," Dohyun said. "He's worked for me for 11 years. "It isn't him," the woman whispered. "Look at his hands. Then tell me I'm wrong." His thumb hovered over the fob, suddenly heavier than it had ever been in his life. Behind him, the garage lights buzzed. Somewhere close, a man who wore his driver's face was waiting to take him somewhere he would never come back from, and the only person standing between Dohyun and that car was a stranger who shouldn't have known anything was wrong at all. If this kind of story pulls you in, stay with me. It only gets heavier from here. Like this video and subscribe now, because you don't want to miss where this one goes. Dohyun Kang was 44 years old, and for the last 16 years, he had run Kang Logistics Group, a shipping and freight empire his late father had built from 3 rusted trucks into a company that moved cargo across half of Asia. People in Seoul's business circles called him cold, precise, a man who never raised his voice because he never needed to. He hadn't always been that way. There had been a time, almost 20 years ago, when Dohyun was 19 and broke and angry, when an 11-year-old boy named Jaiwoo had followed him home from a noodle stand because he had nowhere else to go. Dohyun's mother had taken the boy in without asking a single question. Jaiwoo had grown up calling Dohyun Hyung before he ever learned to call him boss. When their mother died, Jaiwoo had been the one who held Dohyun up at the funeral, not the other way around. Now Jaiwoo was 30, sharp-suited, and running the international shipping contract division of the company Dohyun had handed him without hesitation. People joked that the Kang brothers were closer than most men were to their own wives. Dohyun trusted exactly 4 people in his life. Jaiwoo was supposed to be one of them. The woman in the garage said her name was Yerin. She was 26, worked the overnight audit desk at the Changi Grand, and had been quietly losing sleep for 3 nights straight. "I checked the access logs," she told him, pulling him through a service door before he could ask anything else. "Every car request, every camera feed that comes through this hotel crosses my terminal before anyone deletes it. That's my job. Nobody important. Nobody anyone notices." "Then how did you notice this?" "Because 3 nights ago somebody requested your driver's full weekly schedule," she said, "through a private relay that isn't supposed to exist on our system. I almost missed it. I wish I had missed it." They stood in a narrow service corridor lined with pipes, lit by a single flickering bulb, the kind of space that existed in every building but that nobody with money ever walked through. Yerin leaned against the wall, catching her breath, and for a second she didn't look like a woman who'd just dragged a powerful man out of his own garage. She looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in days. "You move fast for someone who says she's scared," Dohyun said. "I'm not scared of you," she answered. "I'm scared of being 30 seconds too slow." "Too slow for what?" She hesitated, and in that hesitation Dohyun felt something cold settle into his chest before she'd even said a word. "Whose line requested the schedule, Yerin? Say it." "Dohyun Kang's," she said quietly. "Your brother." The name hit the corridor like a glass shattering on tile. Dohyun's face didn't move, because that was the thing about him. 16 years in this business had trained his face to go perfectly still right before something inside him went dangerous. "My brother doesn't touch logistics scheduling," Dohyun said. "He hasn't needed to in years. He didn't touch it for logistics." Yerin's hands were shaking again, worse now. "Mr. Kang, he's not trying to move you somewhere. He's making sure you never arrive anywhere again." Dohyun said nothing. For the first time in longer than he could remember, his mind went completely, terrifyingly blank. "You're lying," he finally said, but his own voice didn't sound convinced. Yeren reached into her uniform jacket and pulled out a cracked tablet, screen dim in one corner, held together at the hinge with tape. I'm not, she said, and I can prove it. I want you to imagine finding out the person who raised half of who you are is the same person counting the minutes until you're gone. Stay with me, this is where it gets worse. Yeren's thumb moved across the cracked screen with the kind of speed that only came from doing something forbidden too many times to risk getting caught. I shouldn't even have this copied, she said. If anyone finds out, I'm not just fired. I disappear. The kind of disappear where nobody asks where I went. Then why risk it? She looked up at him, and for the first time that night her voice didn't shake at all. Because 3 weeks ago, I watched you give a month's salary to a bellhop for finding your father's old watch in a lost and found bin nobody else even checked, she said. Men like that don't deserve to die in a car without knowing why. Dohyun had no answer for that. He hadn't expected one to exist. She turned the tablet toward him. The footage was dark, shot low, and tucked into the corner of a service hallway camera, the kind nobody checked unless something had already gone wrong. Jai was stood with his back half turned, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a tone Dohyun had never once heard his brother use in 20 years. Once he's over the river, he suffocates. Jai's voice said, calm, almost bored. The cabin seals automatically passed 60 kilometers an hour. No smell, no mark, nothing the coroner can pin on anyone. Everyone already knows he's been under pressure with the merger. It'll look like his heart finally gave out. A second voice answered, unfamiliar, clipped, foreign-accented. Dohyun couldn't make out the words, but he heard Jaiwa laugh, that same easy, warm laugh from 1,000 family dinners. And the shares transfer to me by morning, Jaiwa said. Like we agreed. The video cut to black. Dohyun's chest didn't move for a long moment. He felt his own lungs forget what they were supposed to do, and then slowly remember. How long have you had this? I pulled it an hour before you walked into that garage, Yeren said. I've been standing behind that pillar for 40 minutes trying to figure out how to stop a man like you from dying without getting both of us killed in the process. Dohyun stared at the frozen black screen as if it might still be lying to him. It wasn't. He knew his brother's voice better than he knew his own. He called me Hyung for 20 years, Dohyun said quietly. He sat beside me at our mother's funeral and held my hand so I wouldn't fall over. Yeren didn't try to soften it. She let the silence sit there and do the only thing silence is good for. When Dohyun finally looked up from the tablet, something in his face had changed completely. The disbelief was gone, replaced by something colder, quieter, and far more dangerous. Tell me everything you know, he said. Starting now. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't smash anything against the wall, didn't call for a security team, didn't do any of the things people would expect from a man who just learned his own brother wanted him dead. He took out his phone instead. Sang-min, he said the moment the call connected. Sir. His real driver's voice was rough, like he'd been shouting through a gag for the last hour. 2 men jumped me in the staff lounge an hour ago. I think they work for Jaiwo. I'm tied to a chair, but I'm not hurt bad. Stay quiet. Stay still. Someone's coming for you in 10 minutes. He hung up before Sang-min could ask anything else. Yeren watched him work, arms crossed tight over her chest, like she was holding herself together with her own hands. You're not panicking, she said. Panicking gets people killed. Dohyun answered, already typing his second message, fingers steady, voice flat. Calm gets him caught. He texted his head of security a single line, quiet extraction. Staff lounge. 2 unknowns. No noise, no police, no questions yet. Then he texted his lawyer. Need everything on Jaiwoo's personal accounts tonight. Don't ask why. What about the car? Yeren asked. The man's sitting in it right now. He's still waiting for you. Dohyun glanced toward the garage entrance, where the fake driver sat motionless, patient, unaware that the man he'd been hired to kill now knew everything. Let him wait, Dohyun said. Let him think it's still working. He slid his phone into his pocket and looked at Yeren with something close to respect for the first time. You said you managed the audit trail, he said. Does this hotel have a way to watch someone without that someone knowing they're being watched? A small, tight smile crossed her face, the first one all night. Every hallway you've never noticed, she said. I have. She led him through a door disguised as a maintenance closet, into a corridor that didn't exist on any blueprint Dohyun had ever been shown. And he'd been shown all of them. How long has this hallway existed? since the 2019 renovation. Nobody ever updated the official floor plan. It's easier that way. She moved fast and quiet, like she'd walked this exact path 100 times in the dark. This building forgets things, she said. I just remember them. They stopped at a service panel near the east wing. Yeren pulled a thin cable from her bag and connected it to the tablet, fingers moving with practiced precision. Camera feed from the executive lounge, she said. Jawo likes to watch from up there. High ground, good signal. He thinks nobody else knows about that angle. The screen flickered to life. Jawo stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear again, calm in a way that made Dohyun's stomach turn. Beside him stood a man Dohyun didn't recognize, tailored suit, foreign watch, posture far too relaxed for someone helping plan a murder. He'll take the river road at 7, Jawo said into the phone. Like always. Nobody ever changes that route, not even him. The other man said something Dohyun couldn't hear. Jawo laughed. Easy, familiar, the same laugh from 1,000 birthdays and hospital waiting rooms. By morning, Jawo said, none of this will matter. He'll be a sad story in the papers, and I'll be the good little brother cleaning up the mess he left behind. Dohyun's hand tightened on the edge of the panel until his knuckles went white. He's enjoying this, Dohyun said quietly. Not a question, a discovery. Some people only feel powerful when someone else is afraid, Yeren said. It doesn't mean he never loved you. It just means it doesn't matter anymore. Dohyun looked away from the screen first, jaw tight, eyes burning with something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief, something with no name at all. Turn it off, he said. I've seen enough to know exactly what I have to do. If a story like this is keeping you on the edge of your seat, drop a comment right now and tell me where in the world you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the moment, because the next twist changes everything you think you understand about who's really behind this. Dohyun's security team moved fast once the order came down, quiet, surgical, no wasted motion. By the time Sangmin was freed from the staff lounge, Dohyun had already made 3 calls. One of them was to a name he hadn't spoken out loud in almost 2 years. Hannah, he said into the phone, voice flat. Tell me you don't know anything about tonight. Silence stretched long enough to answer the question before she ever opened her mouth. I was wondering when you'd call, Hannah finally said, calm, almost amused. Did Jawo tell you the part about Danong? Or just the part about the river? Dohyun's grip on the phone tightened until the plastic creaked. What happened in Danong? A shipping executive who thought his climate control car was the safest place in the world, she said. A pause, deliberate, theatrical. Funny how these things keep happening to men who underestimate the people closest to them. The line went dead. Dohyun lowered the phone slowly, and for the first time that night, something colder than fear settled into his chest. She's done this before, Yeren said, watching his face change. Hasn't she? To executives across Southeast Asia, Dohyun said. His intelligence team had pulled records in under 10 minutes, insurance payouts, liquidated companies, a trail stretching across 3 countries that had somehow never once raised a flag. Hannah didn't just leave me 2 years ago. She built an entire business model out of leaving men exactly like me. Yeren's eyes widened as the full shape of it settled over her. This isn't about your company's shares anymore, she said quietly. This is a pattern. Jawo isn't the architect of this. He's just the latest tool somebody else picked up and used. Dohyun nodded once, slow, the full weight of it finally landing where it belonged. Then we're not stopping a betrayal anymore, he said. We're stopping someone who's done this enough times to believe she'll never get caught. He walked back into his penthouse at exactly 6:40, the time he'd told his brother he'd leave. Jawo was already there, sitting on the couch like he hadn't spent the last 3 nights planning a murder, scrolling through his phone, looking up with the same easy smile he'd worn since he was 11 years old. Cutting it close, Hyung Jawo said, car leaves in 20. Traffic on the river road gets bad this time of morning. Dohyun set his briefcase down slowly, unbothered. I know exactly how it gets. Jawo's smile didn't move an inch. I know you do. Dohyun poured himself a drink he had no intention of finishing, keeping his back to his brother 3 full seconds longer than necessary, just to make sure his face had nothing on it when he turned around. You look tired, he said. Long week. Handling the merger paperwork without you. Somebody has to, Jawo said, and laughed that same warm, familiar laugh from 100 dinners, birthdays, hospital waiting rooms. The laugh Dohyun used to find comforting. Now it crawled under his skin like something foreign. They talked for 10 more minutes. Shipping routes. A board meeting moved to Thursday. Jaewoo even asked about Sangmin, sounding genuinely concerned, and Dohyun answered like a man who hadn't already heard his brother's voice on a recording, calmly planning his death. Heading out, Dohyun finally said, checking his watch. "Don't wait up," Jaewoo said, still not looking up from his phone. "I never do." Dohyun paused at the door for half a second, long enough to feel 20 years collapse quietly into one hollow goodbye. And then he kept walking because stopping now would cost him everything. Behind him, Jaewoo was already typing a message to someone else, smiling at his screen like the hardest part of his night was already over. It wasn't. Dohyun didn't walk toward the armored sedan waiting at the curb. At the last second, he shifted 10 degrees right toward the pedestrian gate, where Sangmin was already waiting in a plane delivery van, engine running. Behind them, the fake driver sat motionless in the black car, still waiting for a man who was never coming. Across the river, at a scenic overlook above the bridge, Jaewoo stood beside Hannah, binoculars raised, watching the empty stretch of road where Dohyun's car was supposed to disappear into the water below. "Any minute now," Jaewoo said almost gently. The decoy car crossed the bridge exactly on schedule. Nothing happened. No suerte. No crash. Just an empty car driving on completely fine. Jaewoo lowered the binoculars slowly, confusion spreading across his face right as Dohyun stepped out of the shadows behind him. Yerin beside him, tablet still in her hand. "Looking for someone?" Dohyun said. The binoculars hit the ground. Jaewoo didn't speak. Couldn't. His face drained of every ounce of color it had ever held. For the first time in 20 years, his older brother's little brother had absolutely nothing to say. Jaewoo didn't run. There was nowhere left to run to. Dohyun's tactical team had already closed the perimeter around the overlook, quiet, clean, exactly the way he'd asked. Hannah reached into her bag for the gun tucked inside it. But Yerin had already seen the movement 3 seconds before it happened. She'd spent the entire night watching hands instead of faces, and she called it out before anyone needed to be told twice. 2 agents had Hannah on the ground before her fingers ever found the grip. Jaewoo finally spoke, his voice cracking in a way Dohyun had never heard before, not even when their mother died. "I didn't want it to be like this," he said. "You wanted my company," Dohyun answered. "Not my forgiveness. There's a difference." By morning, everything Yerin had pulled together, the recording, the financial transfers, the overseas insurance files, Hannah had never imagined anyone would connect sat on the desks of 3 separate federal agencies. Unfakeable. Undeniable. Jaewoo was led out of the only home he'd ever known in handcuffs, past the garden hedges he used to hide behind as a boy, playing pretend games with a brother who once believed nothing could ever come between them. Dohyun stood at the garage entrance long after the cars had pulled away, the same spot where a stranger in a faded uniform had once grabbed his arm and changed the rest of his life. "You could have walked past me that night," Yerin said, stepping up beside him. "Most men would have. Most men would have died in that car," Dohyun said. "I'm not most men." "Apparently," she said, "neither am I." 3 months later, the company's newest chief financial officer sat in a corner office overlooking the same garage where it had all begun, a long way from a night shift, spent cleaning rooms nobody ever thanked her for. Dohyun never spoke to his brother again. Not at the trial. Not after. Some bridges, once they fail you, can never be trusted to hold your weight again, no matter how many times you crossed them safely before. If the people closest to you are capable of this much silence, how well do you actually know the ones still standing beside you tonight? If this story got you, hit like, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe because the next story is already waiting.